There was no massive election fraud. There were no mass deaths from the COVID vaccine. There is no evidence that it was manufactured in a laboratory. There is no evidence that Jeffrey Epstein was murdered by somebody. The reality is every single thing I said is true, and I will debate you on any platform.
The one on instant virology you're saying wasn't true. That's where you lose credibility.
You have no idea.
Well, hang on, Destiny, hang on.
That's just stupid.
Hang on, Destiny.
Let me finish my point. Excuse me. Let me finish my point. The problem is that the problem is that you guys spent so much time spreading these conspiracies that when you finally wound up, sir, I don't even know if you know. Do you even believe that viruses and germs are real? I'm not actually sure.
Piers Morgan of Piers Morgan Uncensored had Brian Tyler Cohen and Destiny on to debate MAGA commentators Natalie Winters and Ben Ferguson. As you can see from the opening clip, things get a little bit heated. Let's take a look at some of this together, and then I want to know what you think in the comments. Let's check it out.
Brian Tyler Cohen, I mean, I do think it's a non-partisan issue. Obviously, nothing is these days, but I do think that it is completely baffling to me, just as a journalist, that you have this extraordinary scandal that rages away for many years. The main perpetrator dies in prison and is believed to have taken his own life. But the only person that's actually been made criminally accountable and is now languishing in prison is Ghislaine Maxwell, his kind of madame figure, who's a woman. So none of the other men who are widely believed to have been involved in this, none of them have been made accountable. What's your view of this?
Yeah, I mean, my view is that this is a con job by this administration. All of these people, Kash Patel, Alina Habba, Dan Bongino, Donald Trump, all of them came forward and said that this was a priority for them because they were stringing their supporters along. And then the moment they get into power, here we are in a situation where the whole thing is just closed and we have no further information on this. And yet, look, I think it would be fools to be surprised. I mean, this is a guy, Jeffrey Epstein, who Trump himself palled around with for years. This is a guy who Epstein himself called his closest friend
kicked him out of his club.
This is a guy who Jeffrey Epstein said was his closest friend for 10 years. This is a guy who Donald Trump appointed as his Secretary of Labor, Alex Acosta, who handed him a sweetheart deal, a non-prosecution agreement where he was out of prison 6 out of 7 days a week. So, look, Trump can say what he wants on the campaign trail in the lead up when he needs to get everybody's votes and pander to the base. But at the end of the day, he's the guy in charge. And suddenly the about face from everybody in his administration, the buck falls to one person. It's not Alina Habba or Carolyn Levitt or Dan Bongino or Kash Patel. It's Trump himself.
I got to give Piers Morgan credit for even calling it out. But, I mean, it's just so flagrantly ridiculous that Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison and nobody else is for these crimes, Democrat or Republicans. And, of course, MAGA is going to scream Bill Clinton and even Tom Hanks. There are pictures of Trump palling around with Epstein, and Ben Ferguson says something like, he kicked him out of his club. Well, that doesn't negate crimes of the past.
I mean, Natalie, the interesting thing in terms of the timeline here is that when Elon Musk fell out pretty spectacularly and suddenly with Donald Trump, one of the things he posted on his X platform was, bombshell. The biggest bombshell is that Trump's in the Epstein files, right? And that was only a few weeks ago. And since then, there seems to have been a concerted effort for this story to just go away. Now, these two things may be completely unconnected. There may be nothing more to it other than Trump obviously was seen around Epstein. They clearly were very friendly for a while. I think he used his plane several times. I don't think that's in dispute.
Well, this is one of those topics that I think Piers Morgan is actually behaving a little bit more like a journalist on, because whether or not you go in for the conspiracy theory meat and potatoes on stuff, this particular one is just so absurdly fishy. On the one side, you've got the doctored footage. It's incredibly convenient that this guy kills himself in prison and the camera's off, and more and more and more and more. And again, we don't have evidence. We don't have evidence that a murder was committed, but there's just so many juicy bones that fall into the conspiracy theory bucket. It's difficult. Cenk Uygur has a number of videos that sort of go into this. It's hard to resist. And particularly after beating the drum of like, release the files, to suddenly poof, be like, oh, there's nothing burger here. I mean, this is what the destruction of the truth looks like when it flips around and bites you in the ass, right? And it's going to be interesting. Obviously, we've got Ben Ferguson just saying, towing the party line and defending Trump. It's going to be interesting to see what Natalie Winters says about it. Check it out.
Saying that publicly and everything getting shut down a few weeks later. But am I reading too much into this?
Well, look, I think this is very quickly approaching. I mean, we've already passed debacle territory, but just outright grift. And that's probably not something that you would expect me to say, but this is just absolutely reprehensible. I think if you look at what really the MAGA base, the people who elected President Trump, what their sort of concerns have been these past few months is that the administration is not moving fast enough, right? They're not content with the press releases and the tweets. They want to see prison sentences and actual accountability for people that they believe committed crimes. Now we've hit the point where we're not even getting the press releases or the strongly worded letters.
It's crazy for me to say it, but I actually agree on this point. I think that one of the pain points on the MAGA movement is this law and order. There are, I think, MAGA folks who really believe in this law and order, what from this administration is complete BS. And to see this just tossed out the window. I mean, Trump was clearly involved. At some level, we need to have a complete investigation of this. My thing would be, like, if anybody committed a crime, put him in prison. If it was Hunter Biden, put him in prison. If it was Joe Biden, prove it, put him in prison. If it's Donald Trump, prove it, put him in prison. Bill Clinton, Tom Hanks, let's take a look at the evidence. Let's work the system. Let's put him in prison.
Yeah, I mean, Destiny, it is fascinating to see how a lot of the most diehard Trump supporters in the kind of podcast, YouTube, influencer world, they've turned pretty vengefully against him and the administration over this. What do you make of it?
So here's the reality. The reality is, I keep hearing people like Joe Rogan saying the conspiracy theorists ended up being right about everything. They weren't. They were wrong about basically every single thing. There was no massive election fraud. There were no mass deaths from the COVID vaccine. There is no evidence that it was manufactured in a laboratory. There is no evidence that Jeffrey Epstein was murdered by somebody. The reality is every single thing I said is true, and I will debate you on any platform over that.
The instant virology you're saying wasn't true. That's where you lose credibility.
You have no idea.
Hang on, Destiny. Hang on, Destiny.
Please stop.
Stupid.
Hang on, Destiny.
Let me finish my point. Excuse me. Let me finish my point. The problem is that the problem is that, sir, I don't even know if you know. Do you even believe that viruses and germs are real? I'm not actually sure. Please stop.
I do.
The problem is that conservatives spent all this time. Conservatives spent all this time.
You would understand that too.
Conservatives spent all. Well, if you want to bring me on your show, we'll talk about it anytime, anywhere. Okay. Conservatives spent all this time.
I don't insult my audience with stupid
comments.
Well,
hang on. Let me jump in. Let me just jump in on this point.
Excuse me. Can I wait? Hold on. Wait.
Destiny. Let me
wait.
Well, you made a series of statements there about.
And I'm almost over my one sentence.
All right.
Conservatives spent all this time with all these conspiracies, and then as soon as they got into office and they no longer had a deep state to blame, all of a sudden there was no election fraud evidence. There was no evidence about Hunter Biden being conspiratorial, with Ukraine or Russia. There was no evidence of Epstein being murdered, and that's what's happened.
Okay.
They are now the deep state. They have every part of the government under control, and they have no evidence for any of their claims.
But here's the problem.
Yeah, well, I'm going to stop it there. Piers Morgan has some real characters on the show. I think Ben Ferguson is probably the chiefest among the douchebags that he's got on here. But Natalie Winters actually sounding rational, which is sort of eyebrow raising. I think Brian Tyler Cohen is very good on his feet, right? This guy always is able to land his points clearly and off the cuff. And Destiny is a firebrand. I don't disagree with most of what Destiny says. Sometimes I think the manner in which he says it gets in his way a little bit. And he just rattles it off so fast, I think it makes it easier for some listeners to discount what he's saying. But let me know what you think here. I would say that Epstein's death is definitely suspicious. It's a juicy conspiracy theory bone. We don't have a smoking gun. We do have this video that they say is raw. It's been doctored. The metadata proves that. How it was doctored is not in the metadata, so it could be sort of a red herring. But again, you add it to the list of fish. Fishy fish. And That's why you would need a really thorough, nonpartisan investigation. I think that if you want to watch this full conversation, it's on Piers Morgan's channel, Piers Morgan Uncensored. You should go check that out. But the nut is that only Ghislaine Maxwell has been held accountable for this. Clearly involved, of course. I'm not saying she shouldn't be, but what about everybody else? Right? They're just this big nothing burger. Everybody forget it. Let's move on. Where are my Destiny peeps out? Do you think that he's making the right points here? What about Brian Tyler Cohen? You tell me. If you're a Ben Ferguson person, I'm not sure why you're watching this, but let me know if I'm wrong here. Chime in. Let me know what you think in the comments.